Good morning.
Good morning.
It's just me, no slides. I'm Tracye Matthews, again, for people who weren't here at the beginning. I want to thank Jay Cook for inviting me and talking me into doing this. I had never imagined in a million years that I would be invited and that I've actually come back to campus, and especially not to talk about this topic, which still, the idea of doing something besides being a tenure track professor with a PhD, this topic has continued to kind of dog me through my whole career. So I'm glad to be here. I guess I'm going to do some narrative storytelling. I'm going to basically kind of tell you how I got here, what my experience was like here in the department, and then leave most room for you all to ask the questions that you really want to know about. I also want to thank all the staff who worked so hard to corral the cats and get us here, especially Chloe Thompson, who does all the magical administrative work that I'm so familiar with, and it's often underappreciated, and it's definitely an important skill set, and one that I kind of learned by doing. So, and you'll find that to be a constant theme in my presentation, is kind of figuring things out as I did them, and happenstance and the universe looking out for me and all those other kinds of things. I did not have a blueprint. I had no clue. So when I started graduate school, I had no clue. But first, I'll tell you what I do now. So I'm the executive director of a center at the University of Chicago. It's called the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture. We're a research center. We sometimes act as a community and cultural center for our students and for community members off campus. We support graduate student and faculty and sometimes undergrad research on issues pertaining to race and politics. We offer graduate teaching, fellowship opportunities, lectureships for graduate students, research travel grants, dissertation write-up fellowships. We have an undergrad major and minor, used to be called Comparative Race and Ethnic Studies, and Monday we changed it to Critical Race and Ethnic Studies. It was an ad hoc curriculum committee. We're revising that curriculum. We also have an artist in residence program, which existed before I got to the university 15 years ago, but was revised significantly about 8 years ago because of budget cuts. I got together with this guy named Theaster Gates, who, was some kind of assistant, something or other on campus. I don't know if people know who he is now. This is before he was the Theaster Gates. And so we decided to combine our funds and create an artist residency for Chicago-based artists whose work engaged with race and ethnicity. And so we're, I think, in our 7th or 8th cohort. And so that's been really exciting for me to be able to participate in that kind of creative activity. So all of that to say, basically, I do a little bit of everything. So I manage the day-to-day of the center and oversee staff. I also have my hands in the curriculum and the changes that are being made to the curriculum now. Run this residency program and do tons of public programs, which that's kind of my favorite part of the job. And because I feel like that's my opportunity to kind of, one, share the resources of the university with broader communities off campus. I can't remember, I think it was maybe Fred Moulton that said, when you get into academia and steal everything you can. And so it's like, don't tell anybody at UC I said this, but basically I see that my job is to kind of harness the resources and give them away to, folks who might not otherwise get them, and opportunities to create learning experiences for both our faculty and students, but also for them to kind of learn things from folks off campus, and to see it as a two-way street and create panels where you bring scholars in contact and in conversation with activists who are working on similar topics, and see what happens, or artists coming together with professors and kind of cooking up some good juju. So that's my day job, and I also have a number of side gigs. And again, an example of kind of making it up as I go is this administrative position. I don't teach at all. I didn't want to teach. Has allowed me to kind of create space for myself to do other things that I'm interested in. So documentary film work. As mentioned in the bio, I produced a short documentary called 63 Boycott, which tells the story of a Chicago public school boycott in 1963, where over 200,000 students, with their parents' support, walked out of school to protest segregation and unequal distribution of educational resources. And I worked on this with a man named Gordon Quinn, who's one of the founders of Cartemquin Films in Chicago, which is the major documentary film production company in Chicago, and pretty well known across the world. And it was a great opportunity for me to learn from Gordon. Much of the archival footage that was in the film, he shot when he was a student at the University of Chicago, so that was kind of exciting. I'd been sitting, in a vault somewhere for 50 years, and we were coming up on the anniversary, so like, hurry up, let's get this done. 5 years later, we missed the anniversary, but we got it. And amazingly, it got shortlisted for an Academy Award, which was stunning to me. Like, how did that happen? It's a short. It's historical. Nobody even wanted to fund it because it was historical. But it was historical, but also being made at the time when the former mayor of Chicago had closed down 50 public schools, and there was having a big teacher strike, and all these things going on in education around the same exact topics that were covered in the historical part of our film. So we were able to make that connection for people. And we've shown this film all over the world. And amazingly, everywhere we go, folks find a way to connect to the story, because these issues are so not only nationally relevant, but globally relevant. We just got an invitation to go to Colombia in March. I don't know if that's going to happen. But, folks are, still, this has had kind of a longevity that I didn't see coming. One of my other side gigs is that a few years ago, I got together with 4 other Black women historians who studied the Black Panther Party, in particular women and gender and sexuality in the Black Panther Party, which was my dissertation topic. We've known each other for over 20 years. We'd met during grad school. We'd see each other at conferences. We may have been in similar publications together. And it was coming up on the 50th anniversary of the party, and we got together and started talking about how, we thought that this area of research would be further along than it is, and that a lot of the issues we were raising 20-something years ago have still not been properly addressed in the literature, but also that there was this broader popular audience for the topic, and that we were sitting on all these jewels and resources, and so what could we do to try to, get it out to a broader public? And so we started the Intersection of Black Panther Party History Project, and it ebbs and flows depending on what's going on in our lives. 2 of our members are tenure-track professors. I'm an administrator, and one of the other members is, I guess, I don't know if she still calls herself ABD, but she actually opted out and didn't finish her dissertation. And we all see ourselves as supporting whatever level of work or wherever we are, taking into account the whole person, not just, the scholar, but also being cognizant of each other's lives and what's happening, and, kind of our work situation, our family situations. So we've done some public speaking. We did a presentation at the Schomburg Center. We have a web presence, and for a while we were doing, what did we call it? Primary source of the month or something like that. So, we find something really catchy, like, an image of Kathleen Cleaver talking about, women's roles in the party or something like that. Things that people don't necessarily think of when they think Black Panther Party. Not the big three, Huey, Bobby, or Eldridge, but, all the women who were the majority of the party who were not only the soldiers, the foot soldiers, but also the intellectual, providing intellectual leadership to the organization, and that their conversations internally on topics like birth control and non-monogamy and what did it mean to create new images of Black manhood and Black womanhood, that they were having these conversations in a way that was, I think, far beyond what people today recognize, and the image of them as the most sexist, the most homophobic, the most whatever of the Black Power era is just not correct, and people still have that, and so we keep trying to chip away at that in whatever ways we can. And then the last thing, I'm on a board now for an organization called Sisters in Cinema Media Arts Center, and it was started by a friend of mine, Yvonne Welbin, who's a documentary filmmaker who got a PhD at Northwestern and has gone on to produce tons of documentaries and to work on both sides of the camera. She's also been a grant maker for documentary film, and she's from Chicago, and she's figured out a way to get a building and get it renovated in South Shore for people who are familiar with Chicago, the Black community on the South Side, to create this media arts center that's going to center work by women, Black women and femmes who are interested in doing documentary work and kind of doing trainings and having a space for exhibition, for screenings. So I'm really excited to be a part of that work. So how did I end up doing all this stuff? That is the million-dollar question. So the first thing I want to say is that I feel like I lied my way through graduate school. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me back up and say how I ended up in graduate school, which was, again, I don't really know what I was thinking. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was an undergrad here at the university, and I was a psychology major. I had taken maybe 1 or 2 history courses. I mean, I was turned off to history very early on, just in grade school. I never had any African-American professors. It was the only time Black people came up was the slavery part, and I went to predominantly white schools, and, everybody's looking at you. And so I was like, oh, that's not for me. But anyway, I actually came to love history through my work as a student activist. And so this was the mid-'80s, and initially I was involved in the anti-apartheid movement on campus, which then started to morph into the student anti-racism protests here in the mid and late 80s. I was part of a group called the United Coalition Against Racism, UCAR, which was a multiracial, Black-led organization. And also, 1 minute, Black Student Union. And so anyway, I ended up applying to grad school because I had these informal mentors who were also my comrades in our political organizations who happened to be grad students. I didn't really even know what a grad student was. I mean, these people who were in my classes, the TAs, I don't know where they came from. I didn't know who they were. Why they were there. Somebody, leading this discussion. So anyway, I applied to grad school because they told me, my friends, one in the history department, Barbara Ransby, and one in political science, Kathy Cohen, convinced me that, you should go to grad school because you could travel, you can do whatever you want, do whatever you want, it's really cool, and I'm they're appealing to my deep nerd instincts, and I'm like, that sounds perfect. So I took a year off, and during that year, I ran a center called the Ella Baker Nelson Mandela Center for Anti-Racist Education, which came out of the student protests, which was kind of one of the concessions that we won from the university. So I did that for a year and learned how to do a bunch of stuff, learned how to write grants, ended up being a part of a grant making body, a national grant making body. Some of this stuff I continued while I was in grad school. I was on some national boards. I was I was doing community organizing with Black women in public housing in Ann Arbor. And so I was learning about history and the importance of history outside of the classroom, but I was learning how to I was learning history because I had to read every book, unlike other people who were history majors undergrad. Like, it's like a book a week. I had to read every line because I just didn't know it. And when I came here, there were no Black faculty. Earl Lewis had been hired. He just reminded me last night that he had been hired but didn't start until I think my second semester. I had no idea how I got into the program. I also got accepted in political science. I don't know how that happened. Thank God I chose history. Yeah, and then, they hadn't had the department, as far as I could tell, hadn't had any Black graduate students since Barbara Ransby started, who was several years ahead of us, and then all of a sudden there was like 5 or 6 of us. And it felt like, I imagine it must have been like when in the 70s the university opened up because of the Black Action Movement, and all these Black students showed up on campus and nobody knew what to do with them, or us. There was nobody to, initially before Earl came, nobody to advise me. They assigned me to somebody who was like a military historian, nobody working in my area, and then Earl came and the magic happened, and he negotiated. I thought this was the folklore that Earl said he's not coming unless they bring other Black faculty, and so that's kind of what happened, right, Earl? And so then by my second or third year, we had, I think, the strongest program in African American history in the country when Robin Kelly came and Elsa Barkley Brown came. So I really lucked out again. I left campus after I defended my proposal. I was tired of being in Ann Arbor 9 years, and so I moved to Chicago. It was kind of like a great migration. Some of my friends had gone ahead, and I followed them. And I had like a year left of my fellowship. I didn't know what I was going to do, and so I started thinking, like, what kind of job could I get? And Barbara Ransby introduced me to somebody at the Chicago Historical Society who said, I don't know if you're really qualified for this, but I'm going to send your name up, and I got the job, stayed at the museum for 5 years. My last year I got a fellowship so I could work part-time, finish my dissertation, corralled my committee back together. They'd all scattered, and I think Earl always believed that I was going to finish, even when I didn't believe I was going to finish. And I felt like once you leave campus, they're like, this one's we've wasted our time because this person is not going to reproduce us and represent us in the field and help us and raise our stature as academics. But Earl, I want to thank for kind of being that person who helped me to see my way through to the end. So I've run out of time. I didn't get to say all the other stuff I wanted to say, but I guess my tips are again, the importance of using your networks and thinking of networks not just as people you know from academia, but people outside of academia who do things that you're interested in doing, and try to figure out a way to kind of volunteer or intern with those folks who are creating knowledge outside the academy, and learn to value your time when you start doing these kinds of things. So I said volunteer, but people should be paid for their creative work and their academic work wherever it is, and so try not to let folks make you do stuff for free, and be open to what the universe drops in your lap. And the question I have for the department is, kind of how do we institutionalize these kinds of opportunities and invest in training for students beyond academia when we have faculty who are not prepared to teach that. So, eventually the funding from foundations is going to run dry, and there's not going to be money to experiment with careers. What do they call it? Career diversity. So how are these departments going to change structurally to make this be able to happen without foundation support? So, are they going to hire folks to teach who are not traditional tenure track folks? I mean, is that going to be a valued position to have? Would somebody like me ever get hired in a history department? Not that I want to, but you know what I mean? Somebody who's not been, kind of on this path to come and teach several people like that, so that they don't have to continually bring people from the outside to talk to students about how to do this kind of work. So I'll just leave it with that question.